Good morning, fifth graders. Ms. Jagodnik here with another math lesson. Today we're doing lesson 13.2, which is about evaluating expressions with the order of operations. You started learning about that yesterday, so let's start by reminding you about that, and then we're going to take it a step further today. So yesterday, you were focused on using PEMDAS. This is the order of operations for any expression or equation that you might want to solve. The first thing that you need to do is look for any kind of parentheses. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but you know parentheses are a symbol that tells you that what's inside of that has to be done first, no matter what kind of operation it is. Once you're done with parentheses, this doesn't come up too much in the expressions and equations you'll be looking at, but in the future, you need to know that the second step is to do any kind of exponent work that's in the equation. If there's none of that, which over the next few days there probably won't be, then you move on to step 3, multiplication and division. Now this is a tricky one because it looks like multiplication comes first, and that's actually not the case. We do all multiplication and division at the same time, just going from the front to the end of the expression, whatever order it comes in. The only thing we're skipping is all the addition and subtraction. The final step is to go back again at the same time. Addition is not above subtraction. They come at the same time, and we do all addition and subtraction from the beginning to the end. That's the final step. Then you have your final answer to the expression. Today we're going to take it a step further and talk about different kinds of symbols that can be used in an expression or an equation. So we talked about the first step being parentheses. But sometimes equations get a little more complicated than that, and we end up having to do parentheses more than once. We don't want to keep drawing those same parentheses over and over again and stacking them up on top of each other because it just ends up looking confusing. So people that write expressions and equations, including you, should be using different types of symbols to indicate, yes, this goes first, this goes next, this goes next. And we start from the most inside parentheses and then move our way out and then go to the other steps in PEMDAS. So if it's confusing now, that's fine. We'll go over it more specifically. There are 3 types of symbols that we might see in the expressions we try and solve today. The first one you're familiar with, the parentheses. It looks like a C and then kind of a backward C. And we always know that that is the first thing you do. But if I need to put something else inside a symbol, and I've already used parentheses once, what I use next is something called brackets. They're a lot like parentheses, except they're squared off instead of being curvy. So that if I see brackets in my equation, the parentheses are inside, then the brackets come next. That is the second thing I do. If I still need another set of symbols, I've got my parentheses, then I've got my brackets, then I need something else to put around my operations. The third thing I use are these fancy curly Q kind of parentheses, and we call those braces. Same word as what you put on your teeth, braces. So if I have all 3 of these as in an expression, and we'll see an example of that a little later on. First I do the parentheses on the inside, then I do the brackets around them, then I do what's inside the braces, and then finally, if there's anything not in any of those symbols, then I go back and I do my other steps of PEMDAS. Okay, so let's try some of these problems, including some of these more complex ones. Okay, if you look on page 743, maybe you've already tried it on your own, or maybe you wanted to see the video first. We're going to go through the guided practice now. So we are starting with number 1 in the guided practice on page 743. Here's my expression, and they ask me to explain what are the steps I would take to evaluate this. Now they keep using the word evaluate. We know that's just a fancy word for solve, figure it out. So let me take a look. What I like to do is go through first and see how many operations I have. There's 1, addition. There's 2, subtraction. And there's 3, multiplication. So I know when I'm done, I will have done 3 different things to get my answer. Now I want to know about the order of those operations. First thing I'm going to look for is parentheses. Yep, here they are. Here's my parentheses. So number 1, I have to do 4 plus 2. Even though it's addition, it's inside the parentheses. That's step 1. Okay. Now, I know that's not the only kind of parentheses anymore. I'm also looking for brackets and braces before I move on to the next step. Oh, look, here we go. I see brackets. Okay. So this minus sign is inside the brackets. So even though it's subtraction, it's inside the brackets. It's like being inside parentheses. That is the second thing I want to do. Okay. And then I'm looking for braces. Oh, there's no braces in this one. So I'm done with step 1. I'm done with all different kinds of symbols, parentheses. No exponents. My third step is multiplication and division. That's what I'm going to do last. And then there's no addition and subtraction. So to answer this question, I would say, first, I'm going to do 4 plus 2 because that is inside parentheses. Then I'm going to do that answer, which is 6, minus 1, because that's inside the outside parentheses, the brackets. So now I'm going to end up with 5. Then the third thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my answer 5 times 3, because that's the only operation that's outside all the different kinds of parentheses. And my final answer for this problem is going to be 15. Okay? So my parentheses step had 2 parts to it. Part 1, the inside parentheses. Part 2, the brackets. Okay? And then my last step was the multiplication on the outside of those. Okay? Here's a different type of question. Here's my equation, or expression. There's no equal sign. Would it be different without the parentheses? So this is really a kind of thinking question that asks me, if I followed the order of operations with the parentheses, would I be doing things in the same order as if I followed it without the parentheses? So if I was doing this equation now, this would have to come first because it's inside the parentheses. So I would do 12 minus 4 equals 8. My next step, because there's no more parentheses, no brackets, no braces, I can just move on. My next step is multiplication and division. Oh, there it is. So now I would do 8 divided by 4. That's 2. Now my third step would be to go back and do the addition and subtraction, which is 2 plus 1. I would get an answer, a final answer of 3. The question asked me, would it be different without the parentheses? Well, let me rewrite this without the parentheses. Okay. If I have no parentheses, that means I don't have this step or that one. I start with multiplication and division, which means I'd be doing this first. Well, that does seem to be different. Let me just make sure it's going to give me a different answer. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So now I can go back, do all this addition and subtraction. 12 minus 1 is 11. Plus 1 is 12. Oh, so those are different answers? So I guess my answer to this question would have to be yes. Yes, it would be different. If there were no parentheses, I would have to do the division first, which would give me an answer of 12 instead of 3, which is the answer I get when I have to do the parentheses step first. Okay. All right, the rest of our problems are just straight expressions. I'm going to move PEMDAS over to the side. Hopefully you got a good look at it already. And that way we can see all these expressions. Okay, going on with number 3. Okay, now being on the lookout for more than one kind of parenthesis today. I see here that I have parentheses and brackets. So the first thing I'm going to do is what's inside the real parentheses. 6 minus 1 is 5. Okay. Now I see I have brackets, so that's going to come next, still in my first step of parentheses. So now I have 7 times 5, which is 35. Okay, I have no braces. So now I can go outside and do multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. I don't see any multiplication or division. So now I'm going to go back and look for addition and subtraction. My answer so far is 35 plus 100. So my final answer should be 135. Okay, moving on to number 4. When I look at number 4, I see there are no parentheses of any kind. There's no parentheses, there's no brackets, there's no braces. I can start right with multiplication and division. Oh, I see it right here. 4 times 3 is 12. Okay. Now I just have to do my addition and subtraction. 17 plus 12, the answer to this one should be 29. Okay. Now if I go over here, number 5, okay, same steps. Parentheses first, here they are. First thing I have to do is 8 plus 1 is 9. Okay, there's no brackets, no braces, no exponents. I can move on to using multiplication and division. Is there any multiplication and division? Yep, there it is. So I'm going to do the multiplication next. 9 times 7 is 63. Okay, I know that from my times tables, of course. Last step is addition and subtraction. Now I can go back and do my addition. 9 plus 63. Oh, may have to actually do some calculation here. Okay, 3 plus 9 is 12. Bring down the 2, carry the 1. Oh, 72. So my final answer to this expression is 72. Okay, and going over to number 6, the last one in the guided practice. Just move PEMDAS a little bit so we can see the whole thing here. Okay. Whoa, now I got all the different kinds of parentheses. Here's a good example of one of the more complex ones. Okay, 4 times 3 is all the way on the inside. Inside the regular parentheses, that's 12. Next, I need to go outside to the brackets. So now I have 12 divided by 2, which is 6. Then I need to go outside to the braces. Now I have 6 plus 3. So inside all of these parentheses, brackets, braces, my final answer is 9. Now I can go to what's outside, and I just have one more thing to do outside the braces. 9 times 6. So my final answer to this one is 54. Okay. Oh, I don't think you can see that. We'll move you over a little. Okay. Next, okay, going over here to number 17, 19, and 21. These are from the independent practice part of the page. I just went through and picked out a few that looked like they might be a little tricky. So if you've already done them, now you get a chance to check what you did and make sure it's correct. And if you are still thinking you needed a little more practice, you'll have a chance to see me go through some of the harder ones. And you can try harder ones in your practice buddy homework. So if I look at number 17, I thought this looked tricky because this is something, this is a mistake a ton of people make, is the multiplication division step. Because I have 2 here. I have both multiplication and division in my equation. There's no parentheses, brackets, braces, that doesn't have to be done. I'm already on step 3, multiplication and division. This is where it gets tricky because that step makes it look like multiplication comes first, but I told you they're the same. So I'm going to go in order from beginning to end. And in this case, the division comes first because it's here. Then I do the multiplication. Then I can go back and do my subtraction because that's my last step. So my answer here should be 40 divided by 4 is 10. Then 10 times 6 is 60. Then I can go back and do 120 minus 60, which gives me 60 as my final answer. Okay. The reason I thought 19 looked a little tricky is because it's decimals in there. So sometimes that can mess us up a little bit. Here's what's in the parentheses first, 7.7 plus 0.3. Lining them up carefully, I end up with 8.0. So hey, I don't need that 0. I can just call that 8. Now I have 8 divided by 0.1. Okay, so that's like saying 8 divided by 1/10, okay, which is the same as keep the 8, flip the 1/10, and multiply instead. So I can do 8 times 10 and get 80. Okay, my last step is to do the times 4. So now I'm talking about 80 times 4, really 8 times 4 is 32. And then annex the 0 is 320. So that should be your final answer for number 19. And finally, 21 I put in there because it has all of our symbols stuck together and some dividing by fractions. So just to make sure your answer is right, first I'm doing the parentheses. 20 minus 6 is 14. Then the brackets, 1 plus 14 is 15. And then the braces, 8 times 15, 8 times 10 is 80, plus 8 times 5 is 40. So this whole braces part is 120. Now I'm doing 120 divided by 1/2, which I know, keep, flip, multiply, dividing by a fraction. Instead of doing divided by 1/2, I can keep the 120 and flip that to do times 2. So my final answer for this problem should be 240. Okay? So those are your answers for some of the trickier ones. Make sure you're using your order of operations correctly. And go on to try the rest of the independent pages and your practice buddy for tonight. And I will see you again tomorrow.